Hi, got a treat for you today. Apparently, it's a treat every week, obviously, because I am the treat of the week. So, today we've got two recipes in one because they're both so easy, so simple, so quick, and similar but different. You'll notice I've got two different types of flour, and that is because they're better if you use specific flours. Now, for the naan breads, because we are making naans and chapatis today, or roti, however you want to say it. For the naan breads, we're just using white flour, all-purpose plain flour. And we quite often have some of this up the Foodshare, so if you haven't got any at home and you want to have a go, please come and grab some. We quite often have yeast up there as well. So again, if it's not something you've got in your cupboard and you want to come and see if we've got any, stop by and see what you can find. So white flour then for the naans, and for chapatis, I've got atta, or it's like, I guess the nearest equivalent would be wheatmeal flour as opposed to whole wheat flour. So whole wheat flour obviously has got all the grain in it, whereas wheatmeal flour has got some of the husks and protective things taken out. So it's a bit easier for people to digest. If you've only got wholemeal flour and normal plain flour, you could use half and half. And that, I think, makes an acceptable, I've got to say this right, wheatmeal flour substitute. Okay, so 1 cup of white, 1 cup of whole wheat. I think that's right. If that's confusing, please ask me in the comment section and I'll try and explain it better. Okay, so we're going to be doing our naan bread dough first, because that's got to sit and prove, because it is an enriched dough with yeast and everything in it. And so, as well as our plain flour, I've got 1 sachet of yeast here. If you're using it from a tin, then you'd want 1.5 teaspoons. It's basically 7 grams, 7.5 grams of dried yeast, active yeast. I've also got a quarter of a teaspoon here of baking powder, because I'm doing it vegan, so there's no dairy in this. I'm going to use the baking powder to do the job that the yoghurt would normally do. Sugar to feed the yeast. I've got some oil and a little bit of salt just to bring out the flavours. So, let's make our naan dough. Sounds like a chain. Other chains are available. Just put that flour out of the way. So we're going to sieve our plain flour and our baking powder and our salt in one bowl. In the other bowl, you'll see here I've got my thermometer. I'm waiting until this water gets down to about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We don't want the water boiling hot, but we want it hotter than tepid, because we want to make our yeast all nice and we don't want to kill it off, but we want to get it active and going. All right, so I'm just going to wait a few more moments for that. And while I'm waiting for that, let's just sieve this. There we go. Last few little bits of flour. Just break those up. That's it. And my baking powder. Let's see how we're doing there. Okay, we've just got 2 more degrees to go, and then we're ready. Right. Might as well put my sugar in, because that needs to dissolve anyway. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Okay, well, it's 109. It's just under now. I've faffed around. So I'm just going to put my yeast in. Give it a whisk. And I'm going to use about a tablespoon of oil. I want this all nice and supple. So it should be okay. Proof in the pudding will be in the eating. Okay, once you've got all that liquid incorporated, there's not a lot of dry bits of flour left. You can start using your hands to bring it together. All right. Now before you turn it out onto your table, make sure your table is nice and clean, because otherwise you're going to be kneading dirty things into your dough, and you don't want that. Okay, once you've got it together in a nice ball, you can start kneading. And it might seem a little bit sticky at first, but that's okay. It will get less sticky and less tacky. You don't want it to be too dry, you see. Right, so your little dough baby should be ready after about between 8 and 10 minutes. Like when you feel it's really nice and smooth, it's not too sticky anymore. We're going to chuck him back in our bowl, and you're going to leave it in a warm place for about 90 minutes, depending on how cold or hot your house is. Now my house is quite cold, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use Manji's advice and stick my bowl in a bowl of hot water, so that it'll be ready sooner rather than later. So we're going to wait until that doubles in size, and then we'll come back. So it's in my bowl, and I'm going to cover it because I don't want it to dry out. I don't want it to get like a hard crust on the top, because it's going to be there for quite a while. So I'll just put that aside. So make sure you cover it. If you're using cling film and you've got a smaller bowl than I've got, like obviously this is a way off my dough, but if you're using a smaller bowl and you're using cling film, you could put a little bit of oil on it, and that will stop your cling film from sticking to your dough if your dough rises higher than mine's going to, if that makes sense. Right, so while we're waiting for our dough to rise, we're going to have a look at how we make our chapatis. So like I said, I'm using butter here. It's quite a nice fine blend, but if you haven't got it, or if you can't find it, you can use plain flour, normal white flour, and wholemeal flour, but do it half and half. So I've got about 2 cups here, and into that I'm just going to have a pinch of salt and some hot water. Now I'm using hot water because it will help give us a nice soft dough, because it has got all the wheaty husks in there, and it can be quite a tough flour. So in order to make it nice and soft, I'm going to use hot water. Just be careful, if you've only just boiled your kettle, it will be too hot to touch, and you don't want that. So I'm just putting a little bit in. using my spatula so I don't burn myself. There's no fats in this, so it's very healthy. For those of you that are on a low-fat eating regime, it's perfect. Pretty much the same principle as with your naan breads. Like once all the flour seems to have absorbed some water, you don't need any more than that. Just a little drop more. Stick my hands in now because you can get a better feel of it when you've got your hands in there. Alright, just a little bit more water, I think. Get them out onto my board. Look at it, it's nice and sticky. Once again, the more you knead this, obviously, knead this like you do with the other one, because you're getting that gluten to work. That will stop your bread from tasting too hard. Keep it nice and more soft and moist. Now, once again, once you've got a nice smooth dough, baby, you can stick them in your bowl. And I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the tips of my fingers, because again, I don't want this to dry out. And I'm going to let them have a little rest now while I get my pan ready. So it's been resting for a couple of minutes. I'm just going to divide it now into, well, just give it one more little knead, because I've put that oil on the top, and then I'm going to divide it into 10 balls. So, easiest way is to make it into a sausage, really. Right. You want them pretty even, because you don't want somebody moaning that they've got the smallest bread. So, I don't know if you saw what I just did there. I'll do that again. I like to make it into a nice smooth ball, so just pull the sides in like that, and then give it a roll. Meanwhile, while I'm rolling my balls, I'm using what's called a tower, but if you don't have one and you've got a cast iron skillet, that would be just as good, unless it's got the ridges in, obviously, not that. What else could you use? A solid bottomed frying pan would be okay. You know, you just want something that can take a lot of dry heat, really. So, yeah. I've seen people do it in frying pans. That's okay. Just what you've got to hand, really. So, you get your ball, flatten it down a bit. And I was taught, because sometimes when you roll out, you sometimes get a thick edge, don't you? So, I mean, I was taught to do it with just my hands, but I'm not very good at it, because I use modern implements like rolling pins. But for that as well, this is a handy method. And if you want to try and do it authentically, basically, I've got 2 fingers underneath. I'm using this heel of my hand just to make the edges thinner, sort of to give me a head start. And if you didn't have a rolling pin and you wanted to try and make these, you do this process until it was like, you know, maybe a bit bigger than that. And then you just start beating it with the heels of your hands, and you'll see it gradually get bigger and bigger. But I'm not going to do that because I haven't done it for years. When it gets to about 3 inches, and you'll see it's a lot fatter in the middle, and then I'm just going to roll it out into my sort of circle. Meanwhile, my iron pan here is getting nice and hot. Not too hot because I don't want it to burn before it cooks. Right. And then you just pat off the excess flour, because if you've got too much flour on your chapati, it's going to burn when it goes onto your skillet, and you don't want that because it will spoil then the taste, the flavour of your chapati. So we're going to leave it on there for about 50 seconds. You'll see that the colour of it is starting to change where it's cooking on the other side. And if you look really carefully, you'll probably see some little bubbles where it's like starting to puff up. So once the colour is completely changed on this side, and you see it probably, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but it's a bit browner. Just flip that over. Right. Feel free to use oven gloves. I just got asbestos fingers now. And once that's been on there for again about 50 seconds, I'm going to take it off. Now obviously you can't do what I'm going to do next if you've got an electric cooker, so you just have to keep it on here until you feel it's cooked enough. But this next bit is really like where it all puffs up and it's actually like nicely cooked. Right, so you can see it's all coming up now. And I just stick it on the flame. Great to do on a barbecue. This just makes it a lighter bread, less dense. And that is your chapati. It will be hot when you take it off the grill, so watch your fingers. And I do one more so you can see what I did. It's so quick. Chapatis are best eaten fresh, really, as well. I wouldn't store them. If you do have to store them, though, if you're making like quite a bit ahead of time, you could freeze them. That would be okay. But they do tend to dry out because, as you can see, there's no oil in them. Just that little bit that I put on the top to stop it drying out. Have a go. Let me know how you get on as well. If you experimented with different flours, I'd be really interested to know how these would turn out if you're using gluten-free flour, because I think that's a drier flour as well, isn't it? So see how you get on. I'll just cook this and I'll see you in a bit, because we're still waiting for our dough to rise. So we will be back. So back to our naan breads then. Right, once you get your dough out, you need to just knock it back slightly. You don't want to knock it back too much because you don't want to take those air bubbles out. If you were making normal bread, you probably would. You probably would want to knock them right back, but we don't. We want those air bubbles. And remember, we're not using the yogurt, which also helps the bread dough to rise and expand. So we want to keep some of our air. The technique for rolling them, I just do it the same. You know, just break it up. These are bigger balls. I always do the naan breads a bit bigger than chapatis. But yeah, get all your balls ready, and you can stick them back in your bowl, because again, we don't want them to dry out. So just put that over there. Now, my skillet is heating up nicely now. Nice and hot, because we want to recreate those kind of charcoaly, not burnt bits, but you know, cooked bits. That distinctive sort of look that you get with a naan bread. Let's say that. So, just a tiny bit of flour. I don't want too much. I don't want this to be all floury and dusty. And I'm just going to roll it out. If you can get a lengthways, I don't want to turn that over. I don't really want it round, if we can help it. Let's see how we go. And this, of course, is going to be thicker than your chapati. That's one of the things about the naan bread. It's not as healthy as a chapati because, first of all, the flour isn't as healthy. It's gone through extra processes, and also it's got a bit of oil in it. Also, what else can we say about it? It's a lot thicker. There's a lot more bread for your money. So I'm going to try and make this into a bit of a teardrop shape, like that. Stretch it out there. Now, we're using our cast iron skillet because we don't have a tandoor oven. And what I'm going to do is just sprinkle some water on top of my rolled out naan bread and just use that. And then take that wet side and slap it on my tower. And if you look carefully, you'll be able to see those bubbles again. So that's where it's cooking and separating, and these are the air bubbles that we've chapped in there. That's what we want. Leave it for, I don't know, just under a minute again, like the chapatis. I'm going to let that cook. Just before we do the other side, just give it one more little check. Now, this is where you're going to need a tea towel, or I'm going to need a tea towel anyway. So that's all cooked nicely on that side. Now, you can see the reason why we've used water to stick it to our skillet. And I'm just going to finish cooking it on the open flame. Obviously, if you've got electric, you won't be able to do this. You see how it's browning up? This is how I do it. If you've got a barbecue or a little camping gas cooker, you could do that. I'll do one without doing it this way. But it really is fun. Yum. That is your naan bread without a tandoor oven. Enjoy. Let me know how you get on. I think I might eat this one now. See you next week.